Hey everybody, and welcome back to Every Movie Ever, where we're still trying to review every movie ever made. We've barely made a dent, I think, but we're going to keep going anyway. And this week we're going to start off with our first movie of the week, The Natural. This is the Robert Redford baseball movie. Never seen it before, finally decided to give it a try. As the movie was getting started, I really liked it a lot. It's a period thing. It's like the 1930s, I think. Has a really good start, really interesting. Robert Redford engaging as always. Ultimately, though, the movie gets pretty long in the tooth. You cut a half hour out of this thing, you maybe have a better movie. So I would say overall pretty good, could be better. I'm gonna give it 3 stars. I'll tell you a movie I was surprised by, though, was Pride and Prejudice, wait for it, and Zombies. Turned this on the other day, it was on demand on cable, figured it would be a real stink burger. But you know what? Enjoyed it. Pretty fun movie. Worked out pretty well. You had a fun performance from Matt Smith, who used to be Doctor Who. And you had a really fun performance from Lily James. And she was Lady Rose on Downton Abbey. For you people out there that are nerds like me and watch Downton Abbey, she was also Cinderella in the live-action Disney Cinderella. And now she's fighting zombies in Victorian, I think Victorian. Let's go with Victorian times. It's a pretty fun movie. It's pretty fun. It's another movie that does get maybe a little bit long, but it never really outstays its welcome. It stays pretty good with the premise. My only complaint would be it's PG-13. You make this an R-rated movie with some more blood gushing and stuff, and I think you'd really have something. But for what it is, pretty good movie, 3 stars. Now, I think last year I was hearing a lot of buzz about a movie called Midnight Special, that it was a kind of Spielbergian throwback movie. Finally got a chance to see it. I'm not sure if this movie is set in the 80s or not. I'm going to say that it is, though. It's a movie about a dad is driving that's confusing it already. A little kid has special powers of some sort, and his dad is trying to keep him away from like the government and some sort of a cult that's grown up around the kid, and they're just trying to get him to safety, more or less. It was good, but to be honest with you, here I am a few days after seeing it, and I've kind of forgotten a lot of it. So that's not great, but it was enjoyable. Michael Shannon is the star of this one. He's always a good time. I gotta give this one this is another 3-star movie. Now, one of my wife and I's favorite movies to watch together, believe it or not, it's Twister. I'm not sure what it was that inspired us to rewatch Twister, but man, oh man, we put Twister back on again, and it's just the same as it ever was. It's a fun movie. Is it dumb? Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty dumb. And Helen Hunt, not the greatest, but really fun cast. You got Bill Paxton in there, you got Alan Ruck, you got Carrie Ellis, or however you say that. You got Philip Seymour Hoffman in there, and a bunch of tornadoes and cows flying around and stuff. What do you want? 3 stars. So, saw a Robert Redford movie, right, with The Natural, so that means you gotta watch a Paul Newman movie to balance it out. That's just the rule of the universe. So I went with The Hustler. I'd never seen The Hustler. I had seen Color of Money, which is a sequel to The Hustler, Martin Scorsese picture. So I finally went back and saw The Hustler, where Paul Newman is a young pool player. He wants to beat Jackie Gleason, who's a better pool player, make a name for himself. And once he's played Gleason and lost, then the movie spends a lot of time of introspection, and Paul Newman has this relationship with this woman, and they're kind of trying to find a life for themselves and trying to find satisfaction. George C. Scott's in there as a guy who runs pool hustlers. He puts up stakes for them and kind of employs them in a weird way. It's a movie where it was weird watching it, because while I'm watching it, I really loved the pool scenes. And when they weren't playing pool, I was sort of less interested in it, which is, frankly, a lot of the movie. But then when I turned it off, it was a movie that stayed with me. I really kept thinking about it. It's a real solid slice-of-life movie, a terrific performance by Newman, who puts in a real tour de force in the climax where he returns to the pool hall and confronts George C. Scott. It's a really fine movie. It's a movie that I'm going to have to give 4 stars. Now, folks, At long last, I know I've been waiting for it. I know you've been waiting for it at home. The whole world, it seems like, has been waiting for it. And that's the return of Mystery Science Theater 3000. It's back at long last. And the first movie that they riffed was Reptilicus, a Dutch Godzilla knockoff. Now, I know what you're saying at home. You're saying, Eric, how can you possibly review a movie from having seen it on Mystery Science Theater? Isn't that cheating? And I would say to you, yeah, probably, but I'm going to do it anyway. Just the movie by itself, not talking about the Mystery Science Theater guys and the jokes, just Reptilicus on its own merits, as best as I can figure, is not a very good movie. You know, it's a kind of a 50s scientist standing around talking kind of movie. Reptilicus, a big lizard, he's not in it very much. He's got some weird and wonky effects going for him. When he eats a person, it's a cartoon character, basically, that he's eaten. Yeah, it's a pretty dull movie in the way that those 50s movies can be, unfortunately. I'm going to give it a 1.5 stars. Mystery Science Theater's second movie, Cry Wilderness, a truly bizarre, I'm not sure on the year on this one, late 70s, early 80s, I would say. A truly bizarre movie that's, you know, one of those kind of made by some people who managed to get their hands on a camera kind of a movie. This one's about a young boy who's in like boarding school, but then he gets a secret message from Bigfoot to go back to help his dad, the ranger, in the woods on, I think, what's a hunt for Bigfoot? But they're also trying to stop, I don't know, some sort of poachers or something. It's very confusing and very, very bad. But bizarre in a way that almost makes it watchable, but not quite. It's also a movie where a guy roughs up a raccoon on screen, and that's no good. 1 star. Later in the show, we're going to get down to brass tacks, and we're going to look at some of the Fast and the Furious movies. Of course, the Vin Diesel oeuvre. But before we do that, we're going to take a little pit stop here and look at another Vin Diesel picture in The Pacifier. Now, this is a movie, listen, Vin Diesel, he's a watchable actor, right? And this is a movie where he's an FBI or CIA agent or whatever, and he's got to babysit some kids. So that ought to be some wacky fun. They have a pet duck. The whole thing was written by Tom Lennon and Robert Ben Garant, that, you know, from The State, Reno 911. Is it the strongest effort in the world? No, it's really bad. It's really bad. It's mostly, this feels like a studio and star problem. Excuse me, if it were The Rock, this movie would be amazing. But Vin Diesel never really commits to what the material is, and it's a movie that has a lot of meddling fingerprints all over it. It seems like it was a weirder movie at one point in its development that got turned into a very standard kind of a movie. It's real bad, though. It's a 1 star. I did like Miss Potter, though. You heard me mention Downton Abbey earlier in the movie. Am I a sucker for British period drama? Yes, I am. Is Miss Potter British period drama? Yes, I am. It's Renee Zellweger, and she stars as Beatrix Potter, the lady that did the Peter Rabbit books and stuff. It's a sweet movie. You get to see her life. There's some heartache. You know, it could have more depth to it, but it's pretty charming. It's a good time. If you like that sort of thing, if you're a PBS masterpiece person, you'll enjoy this movie. It's 3 stars. Now, after a movie like Miss Potter, though, you got to get you got to go the other direction entirely. You got to watch an action movie. I went with Mechanic Resurrection. It's a Jason Statham movie that was new to On Demand. I assume it was in theaters at some point. Never heard about it. It's a sequel to a Statham movie from a couple years ago called The Mechanic, which I never saw, which is a remake of a Charles Bronson movie called The Mechanic, which I've seen part of. Does any of that matter? Does it feel like you need to have seen the first one? No. Is any part of the movie involved being a mechanic? No, not at all. Statham being an assassin, and you know what? This one's got a good pace. It really keeps it up. The whole deal is that some bad guys want to make Jason Statham kill 3 people, so you get to that, you know, kind of keeps the action going because you have these, you know, 3 things that he has to do. It's pretty fun. There's some good action. Jessica Alba's there. Michelle Yeoh shows up. It's nice to see Michelle Yeoh again. Tommy Lee Jones shows up for the 3rd act to play just a nuts character. It's a pretty good time. 2.5. Back to Mystery Science Theater land, folks, this time with The Time Travelers. This is a movie that I believe is made by more or less the same people that made Reptilicus. This is another kind of 50s scientists running around kind of a movie. This time involving they've made a time portal. They find themselves in a post-apocalyptic future and lose their time machine, and they're trying to help the denizens of the future Earth to escape Earth in a rocket. This one's fun. Like, it's not a good movie, but it's, you know, it's more watchable certainly than Reptilicus. It's got some fun special effects, kind of some stage magician kind of special effects. It's all right. I'd rather watch it than a lot of other stuff, so I'm going to give it 2 stars. The BFG, for those of you not in the know, that stands for the Big Friendly Giant. This was Spielberg's family picture from last year about a young English girl, orphan, who befriends a giant. And he's a good giant, and he goes around the room, around the world giving people dreams, and then there's a bunch of bad giants that want to eat people. It was watchable. It was like halfway there. There's some real weird stuff in it, particularly toward the end of the movie where they decide they need to go visit the Queen of England. That part gets pretty weird and interesting. The whole thing is watchable throughout. It's not particularly boring or anything. It just fails to be terribly engaging. But, you know, if you were on an airplane and this were one of the movies you could watch, you could do worse. 3 stars. Now, obviously I enjoy an action movie. Who doesn't? And for years you've heard about Steven Seagal, and that Steven Seagal's big picture is Under Siege. I had never bothered to see Under Siege, which, let's face it, it's Die Hard on a battleship. But in this one, Steven Seagal is the cook on the battleship when it gets taken over by Tommy Lee Jones and Gary Busey, and they put all of the crew of the battleship like in prison, right? And now Steven Seagal's got to save them. But it turns out he's not just a cook. He's also like a super crazy karate guy who used to be a Navy SEAL for whatever reason. Seagal is really bad. He is not a good actor in any kind of way. They've added a lady to the Die Hard formula here, so he's running around with a lady in Erika Eleniak. Also, I'm sorry to say, not a great actress. The whole thing, you know, people talk about this like this is an action movie to see. I don't think that it is. Tommy Lee Jones and Gary Busey have good turns as the villains. They're doing a pretty solid work here. But, you know, the whole thing just kind of falls flat. 2 stars. The Big Wedding is maybe one of the worst movies I've ever seen. It is a movie that stars no less than Susan Sarandon, Robert De Niro, Katherine Heigl, that guy from that 70s show whose name I can't remember right now. The main one, the regular kid, not Ashton Kutcher, the main one. There's a bunch of people in this thing. Is it any good? No, it is not. It is very predictable, very rote, not terribly interesting, and it features a bunch of like characters doing terrible things and cheating on each other in ways that have no consequences whatsoever. I did not enjoy it, and yet somewhat watchable. It is a movie that, you know, you can get all the way through, I guess. So I'll give it a 1.5 stars. Now, if you're like me, you're a horror fan, and who isn't? You gotta love a good horror movie from time to time, but you gotta go for the deep cuts. You gotta go looking for the movies that not everybody have seen, but, you know, horror fans know about. One of those movies that's got to be Phantasm. I saw Phantasm a number of years ago when it got its first big DVD release, and everybody was like, oh man, Phantasm. So I finally sat down and watched Phantasm and did not care for it. It's a weird movie. A lot of people really enjoy its non-traditional storytelling style and its lengthy dream sequences. I felt kind of hosed by all of that and didn't really care for it. But that was years and years ago. Lately, I've decided I need to give the Phantasm series another chance. Phantasm 5 just having recently come out, and Angus Scrimm, who plays the tall man in the Phantasm movies, a legendary horror actor, he's passed away. So it's time to give these movies another shot. I found Phantasm 2 on demand, watched it, liked it. Pretty enjoyable. Now, what a lot of the series fans don't care for about Phantasm 2 is it's apparently the most straightforward one. It follows a more or less traditional linear narrative, right, without the dream sequences that are, I guess, a hallmark of the series. But that worked for me, because what I didn't like in Phantasm, Phantasm 2 delivered. It's a crazy story, some fun stuff going on, including 2 double-barreled shotguns that get like taped together to turn into a weapon. There's a crazy like monster that grows out of somebody's spine at one point. You got when they attack the tall man at one point, he's got like stuff shooting out of his face. The monsters are these little Jawa things that attack you. It was a pretty good time. I liked the heck out of it. 3 stars. All right, folks, let's get down to brass tacks and let's talk about these Fast and the Furious movies. There's a new one out, so it's probably time that we talked about these things. And I'm going to be honest with you. Fast and the Furious, Too Fast, Too Furious, don't like them. Don't like them. Never seen either one of them from beginning to end. I think they're dumb and boring, right? I came into the series with Fast 5. We'll get to that in a second. Retroactively went back, watched Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift. This is the 3rd movie in the series. Don't worry about it. So this is number 3. This has none of the regulars of the Fast and the Furious franchise, at least up to that point. Again, it's complicated. I'm sorry. But a kid, Josh Lucas, I think is the actor's name. He's on NCIS New Orleans now. He's a bad kid. He gets into a lot of trouble here in America. So they send him over to Japan, where his dad is in the army or something, to learn some lessons. What lessons does he learn? Street racing, including something called drifting, where you get your car to kind of slide sideways. Lil Bow Wow's in it. He drives around in a Jeep that has a big picture of the Hulk on it and like a 3D Hulk fist coming out of it. It's a crazy movie with crazy car chases. It's a ton of fun. I'm going to give it 2.5 stars. Fast and Furious then is the 4th movie. Now we're back to the regular characters. Your Paul Walker, your Vin Diesel, your Michelle Rodriguez, your Jordana Brewsters. This is sort of a kind of cop undercover type movie. They're trying to take down some drug running across the border. This is sort of the first inkling of the craziness that is going to become the joy of the series. It's a pretty fun movie. It's not as fun as some of the later ones, but it's certainly watchable and entertaining enough. 2.5 stars. Now, Fast 5, like I said, this is where I come into the series. This was an impulse buy on Black Friday, DVD, throw it into the player, see if this thing's any good. Holy buckets. This is an action movie of action movies. This is, if I'm flipping channels and it's on TV, I'm going to watch this sucker, right? This is Vin Diesel and Paul Walker. They've had 4 movies together at this point. You don't need to know anything about any of them, really. It does not matter. But let's just say that they're ex-car thieves and leave it at that, right? They put together this whole team of other car thieves, including Gal Gadot, who's about to play Wonder Woman, and Jordana Brewster's back in this one. Ludacris, and what's the other guy's name? It'll come to me later. Anyway, Tyrese, Ludacris and Tyrese. They all come together to steal some stuff in Brazil, along with The Rock, who is like a CIA agent trying to take him down. It's a bunch of crazy car chases through Brazil, some great heist movie mechanics. It all culminates in 2 cars dragging a giant safe down the streets of Brazil. It's amazing. Is it dumb? Sure, but I'm not even going to try to fault it. I'm going to give it 5 stars. Fast and Furious 6, now we're kind of continuing from 5. The whole group from 5, more or less, is back this time for another caper. This time they're working with The Rock to try and stop an evil British guy from, I don't know, something. Does not matter. This one's pretty fun. Some great set pieces, including a crazy car chase on a plane runway at the end of it. It's a really fun movie that only gets amped up by its post-credit sequence, maybe the best post-credit sequence of all time, when Jason Statham shows up to make this series even crazier. But this entry in and of itself, it's a fun one. It's not the best one, but it's solid. It's 3 stars. Then comes Furious 7, folks, fulfilling the Jason Statham promise. We start with an amazing scene of Jason Statham walking out of a hospital amongst all the bodies and rubble of the people he beat up getting in there to visit his comatose brother. And then it's all about Statham trying to beat up Vin Diesel for 2 hours. The Rock's there. They're all there. This is some crazy fun. Statham versus The Rock. That's something to see. You want to see this, folks. This one's crazy. They jump a car out of a building and into another building in a skyscraper at one point. It's bonkers. It's 4 stars. Now, The Fate of the Furious, this is the one that's out right now, aka the movie where no one wants to be in the same scene as Vin Diesel anymore. Vin Diesel, for complicated reasons, has turned temporarily evil and is helping Charlize Theron while his old team of friends, including The Rock and now Statham, are trying to stop him from what he's doing, right? It's not the best of these movies. There's some bonkers stuff in it. The submarine chase, because there's a submarine chasing cars at the end. That's some pretty nuts stuff, right? But ultimately, I think it gets a little dragged down. It's trying to be really emotional and not pulling it off. It's just not firing on all cylinders here. We don't get to see the Fast family together as much as we do in the other movies, and that's a problem. The opening sequence in Cuba is great too, but you know, it's just not as good as some of them. I'm gonna give it 2.5 stars. So folks, finally watched Interstellar. So this was Christopher. I think this was Christopher Nolan's last movie. He's the guy who did the Dark Knight saga. He did Inception and The Prestige. Christopher Nolan is kind of up and down for me. And I've sort of developed this opinion of him where he's a sort of emotionless filmmaker, right? Where I certainly enjoy the Dark Knight movies. In fact, I like the Dark Knight Rises a lot more than most people. Although I think that's because I think it's silly, but I still like it a lot. I like The Prestige a lot, but I think it was that Inception really left me kind of cold. Like, there's a lot of times these are movies about people who seem like they should be feeling things, but the movies often seem antiseptic. Right? Interstellar comes along. I like all the people who are in it. You got your Matthew McConaughey. You got your Anne Hathaway. You got your Jessica Chastain. I love Anne Hathaway and Jessica Chastain. You got Michael Caine in it. It's a terrific cast. But it was also like 2.5 hours, and I just couldn't do it. Right? I can't watch this. Like, I tried turning it on a couple of times, and the couple of times I started, I was just like, nope, I am not in the mood for this thing. But the other day, finally, I went, all right, I got some time to kill. Let's try this Interstellar movie, see if it's something. And it is something. I loved it. I loved it. It is one of those movies that is about science, that does science well. I'm not sure if all of the science in it is accurate per se, but it still is a movie about scientists and science that makes science cool and interesting and engaging. And there's some genuine emotion in this. Like, I have to take back what I was saying about Christopher Nolan because there's some great emotion in this. The plot involves that the Earth is kind of dying, and Matthew McConaughey goes out on a last-ditch space mission with Anne Hathaway and a couple other people to check out some exoplanets. Planets that exist outside of our own solar system. Sorry, I just mansplained that to you at home. He goes out to check these out, and because of the theory of relativity, when they're traveling at certain speeds and stuff, that means that time passes more slowly for him than it does on Earth. So essentially it means he had to abandon his daughter, and well, she grows up to become Jessica Chastain and kind of hate him, right? So there's some real heartfelt and some real tough stuff in this movie. But it was great. It was kind of everything I loved about the movie Contact, which is a movie that I think that I like a lot more than most people do, but way better. This is a real solid movie that I got to give 4.5 stars to. W. This was Oliver Stone's biopic about George W. Bush. You know what? It wasn't bad. I thought I wouldn't like it very much because it sounds a little, oh my gosh, Oliver Stone is going to do a movie about George W. Bush. This sounds like homework. But it was pretty watchable. It wasn't great, but it was pretty watchable. 2.5 stars. Avalanche. This is another Mystery Science Theater movie. This is Roger Corman trying to do the disaster genre. This one about a ski resort what gets hit by an avalanche. Rock Hudson's in it. Mia Farrow's in it. None of it works. You end up feeling like you're watching a real subpar 70s TV movie. 1.5 stars. Kubo and the Two Strings, this is the latest movie from Leica, the stop motion people that did Coraline and Paranorman and Box Trolls. All three of those are really good movies, you know, sort of more or less, right? Couple, you know, some are better than others, but if Leica's put out a movie, you want to see it, right? So, you know, I've been dragging my feet a little bit about seeing this one, finally hit Netflix, decided to turn it on. Man, this has got to be their best movie. The animation is amazing, you know, especially when you think about how this is all stop motion puppetry. It's tremendous. I would have liked to have seen a documentary about how they did it. There's a brief moment in the end credits where they show animating this giant, like 8-foot stop motion puppet. But the technical stuff aside, the story is really great. It's the story of a young man who, his dad was some sort of great samurai warrior, and his mom is a like magical daughter of the moon, I guess. And they both pass away, and so Kubo, he's got to go out and sort of fulfill his father's destiny to assemble this magical armor to defeat the god of the moon. Charlize Theron is in it, Matthew McConaughey is in it, Ralph Fiennes is in it as voice talent. But this whole, it's so beautiful to look at. The action is exceptional. The story is compelling, and it's never really, while some of the twists in it are a little predictable and heavy-handed, that never really lessens any of the emotional impact or the drive of the story. This is a real animated marvel that, because I think it's not Pixar or Disney or, you know, a dumbed-down DreamWorks movie, because it's a more challenging thing and because it doesn't look like what people are used to seeing, it didn't get the, you know, it didn't get the viewers I think it deserved. It didn't get the audience. But what I'm telling you right now is that this is a movie you should go watch. If you're going to watch any of the movies we've talked about tonight that isn't Fast 5, you need to see Kubo and the Two Strings. 5 stars. That's it for this week. I'll see you next week, and we'll look at some more movies on Every Movie